Okay, here we go again. Well, I'll tell you, this was something. Trying to get this, the components down inside through these pins, and I had to resort to put this back in the vise, put some heat on with the soldering gun onto the pin, and at the same time take my sewing machine needle, which is a lot thicker, and it's about the size of the diodes, these big diodes, the same diameter, maybe just a little bit less. And so I had it up like this in here, and I had the soldering gun on there, and I had to force this on through. When I got it forced through back and forth with the heat on there, and took the heat off and let it cool down and pulled this back out, and I still had to go back in it, go back in the socket again of the pin I wanted. In this case, it's we'll say pin 2 is my cathode for this particular tube that I'm replacing, and I had the needle in, the sewing machine needle in like that, and then I put it down on a bench, and then I forced it on down through until it came out right here. Came up through there. Then I got that out, and then I went down this way. And I shoved this with the eye here, needle eye pointed down, and I carefully, don't put the needle through your hand, safety first. Push this down through here, all the way down until I got to the eye. Then you can force, with a pair of pliers, you can force the needle in a little harder. And these pins are not, they're actually, they got a split in them, but you can't see it normally with your eye, but there's a split. So then once you get this pushed down a little bit, and all of a sudden you see that split appear in the pin, you know then you finally got that loose there, because that was soldered before. And so now there's a little give. Then you pull your sewing machine needle back out. And I don't know what number this thing is, number 2 or 4, who knows, I'm not a seamstress. But now I'm ready to put in my components on those 3 particular pins that I cleaned. I cleaned them all out, but the ones I made a little bit wider to accept the diodes, I opened them up. On this particular tube, which was a full wave rectifier, the 5V4, which is V18. Those of you that have the HT-37, V18, it's a 5V4. Pins 4 and 6 get the anodes of the diodes. Pin 2 will get the resistor. So we get the anode. That's the one without the band. That's the anode. The side without the band is the anode. That's going to go into pins 4 and 6. Now, in order to see what pin is what on this thing, when you look down here at this socket, you see the keyway. It's the same as looking at a tube socket facing up to you. You always go clockwise. You always go clockwise of the keyway. So if this was the tube socket here and the tube was going down in here like this, it would be the same thing. So you just count, you find the keyway there. Pin 1, it will be, we're going to go clockwise, will be pin 1, pin 2, 3, and 4. So pin 4 here is right here. It's 4 pins away from the keyway going clockwise. So then I'll slide my anode into pin 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There, it went through, it's tight. Then the next one is pin 6, so I got to go again from the keyway clockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So pin 6 is right here, and I'm going to put this in. The anode goes into pin 6. There it goes. Now, The cathode of that tube was pin 2. But you'll have to look at whatever, you know, you're building one of these things, so you have to know you got to know how to read a schematic. So pin 2 now is going to get my dropping resistor. Now this dropping resistor here on this power supply, when this thing, because when you put these diodes in and get rid of the tube, and you put bigger capacitors in there, I'm putting computer grade capacitors into this transmitter, and I've designed my own circuit boards, which I'll be putting together here probably next week, and then I'll be making a YouTube of it. But anyway, when you put the solid state diodes in and eliminate the tube, you get a higher voltage, because you're usually using bigger capacitors too. So anyway, this is a voltage dropping resistor, and what you want is look at the schematic and see what the voltage should be with the tube. In this case, the tube, with a tube in there, they want the low voltage section to be 350 volts. So this is going to be more efficient with the bigger capacitors, which means more efficiency and everything. I'm going to have a higher voltage. Instead of 350, I may have 450. But not knowing the current drawn on the circuit, I can't really use Ohm's law until I can measure the current, but I can't do that until I get the thing converted over. So anyway, I'm a rough ballpark, usually for a 5Y3 tube for running high voltage, around 350 volts. Like on an SX99, you'd have a 10 watt at about 330 ohms. I happen, in the junk box, I happen to have a 10 watt 250. So this is a temporary install at this time. Once I get my boards built and get it figured out, I'll find out what the current draw and I'll come up with the right resistor, and then I'll mention it in my video. But for you starting out, I'm starting out with a 250 here. So that's going to be, my cathode's going to be pin 2. So pin 2's 1, 2 from the keyway. So go any way you want with the capacitor, with the resistor. So pin 2's there, and I put this down. I pre-tinned these, by the way, too, pre-soldered them. Like I said, this no lead solder is terrible. But anyway, put that in there. And that's going to go down in there. Oh, wait a minute now. Okay, yeah, I'm in there. And there, it finally popped through. Now, what I want to do here is this thing gets hot. I want to try to keep my bypass capacitors across the diode, keep away from the heat. So you see right now the way it's configured right now, it's not good, because this capacitor is almost touching the heat element here, this 10 watt resistor. So what I want to do then, I want to just take this back, take it back out, but just reverse this and swing this over. Okay, that gives me a little more air gap. And we got pin 2 again. I got to find it. 1, 2 is right here. Put this in there. Okay, well that looks much better. You see the air gap now I got in here? Much better. So I can actually solder these components here on the pins and get them soldered. Then what we're going to do is the two cathodes of the diodes come together, and then this top of the resistor here comes down to that junction. So the AC comes in, gets rectified to pulsating DC. Pulsating DC comes up, goes on through the resistor, out of the cathode to chokes or input capacitors, whichever the circuit has. Most of the time it's to have a capacitor, sees a capacitor, and smooths out the pulsating DC to pure DC. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to solder these two diodes in first here on the bottom. Then we're going to cross these over and then make a connection temporarily. And then this will be ready to plug in. So let me get this soldered in. You see these These things you can push them down in there if you want. Push them all down there as far as you can. And it's right on the bottom. Get it swung over. There's the lead sticking out. When you solder, you want this down on a table with the pressure. And maybe you can use that piece of wood I have for a guide. And that'll work there, see? Or I got a 1-inch hole over here, so I could move around a little bit, but want these, they should be about the same coming out. And solder the 2 dials in first. We'll get that soldered in, and then I'll put the resistor in, and then we'll go from there.